Hey, good Wednesday to you. Thanks for watching. Let me tell you something. Helene is unlike any storm that we've ever seen. I think back to the years of forecasting that I did on television, and don't get me wrong, every storm is different. There's always something different to it. But this storm in particular, the thing is, it's going to be moving quick. It's starting to develop rapidly, and that's going to mean inland damaging winds further than we normally see. Here's why it's different. You've got this trough here digging in. This is an upper low. And if you remember Sandy across the Northeast, you had a strong upper low here that hooked the storm in. That was a little different though, right? This means an area of low pressure, a upper low, if you will, way further south than it normally is this time of year. And now you've got a strong hurricane developing here. Boy, this is an ingredient for that you don't normally see, but this is an ingredient for a fast-moving storm, because once this storm really deepens here, it's going to also start to tug on this upper low to the north. I've been talking about this for the last couple of days. It's also going to do this number on Helene, start to cause it to rotate around it. So these two are going to rotate around each other. Now you've also got high pressure here in the upper levels off the coast. These two together, this upper low here, is going to rapidly accelerate Helene as it nears the coast. Two things with this. Number one, it's going to get bigger as it interacts with this upper low. So you're going to see explosive growth in the wind field. So we've got a huge wind field. That's why you do not get caught up in where the center of circulation goes. While it will be tougher and rougher where the center of circulation goes, this wind field will expand as it interacts with this upper low. Unfortunately, that means it likely will remain in a hurricane status for longer. So if you're in southern Georgia, Tallahassee, not looking good, into Columbus, Georgia, Macon, north up to Atlanta, even Athens, and as far north as the upstate of South Carolina, and of course Florida, all along the west coast, it's going to be a rough go here. Now, once this storm moves inland, now we're talking about by Friday, it's still interacting with this upper low, and look how the upper low now literally starts to absorb it. It loses its tropical characteristics. It's not a warm core storm, as we say in the meteorology world. It's now a cold core storm, meaning you don't really have the tropical nature, but still, we're going to be dumping rain here, and look how it sits, because our flow is up here. And then finally, we see the moisture get kicked out by the time we move into the first part of next week. Let's talk some of the specifics here. This is something that I didn't like to see when I looked at the modeling this morning. This is Mexico. Talked about this a little bit last night. Here's Cancun. There's Cozumel. Over here's Tulum. You've got this storm staying offshore, really just splitting the strait here, moving right into the Gulf of Mexico and just exploding in growth. We're talking about a major hurricane on the way, and unfortunately, we're going to start to feel these effects as early, at least the tropical storm force winds, as early as Wednesday evening along the Florida coast. Storm surge increasing here along the coast too, and then inland into parts of Florida, there will be gusts that will exceed tropical storm force, but the roughest weather looks to be right here along the coast, and then inland into North Florida, once we see landfall heading into Thursday evening. Now, out ahead of it, you're going to get that wind field again starting to expand. And look, the track is to bring it right across Georgia. I mean, we're talking about, Atlanta here, Macon. This thing's going almost right up I-75. At least that's the latest data. And this could be worst case scenario for the mountains of South Carolina and North Carolina and North Georgia mountains, because with a perfectly aligned southeast fetch, you're going to get wind gusts across the ridges, and you're also going to get that heavy rain that gets squeezed out. Take a look at these wind swath paths. This gives you an idea. These are wind gust model data. As you look along the west coast of Florida, I think we see hurricane force. Look at these numbers here across parts of South Georgia. This, again, is model data, but some of the latest numbers, over 130 miles per hour wind gust, holding those hurricane gusts all the way into North Georgia, possibly the mountains of South Carolina and North Carolina. Let's look a little further to the north too. And by the way, hold on. Let me not leave out the east coast here too, because there's going to be a strong onshore flow along the east coast of Florida too, and wind gust inland. Again, tropical storm force looking likely at this point. Further north, look at this. Still continuing those strong wind gusts into Tennessee. We could see hurricane gusts as far north as Knoxville. Does it make it that far? I don't know. But one thing to watch out for is the mountains here. You may even get some downsloping flow with that southeast wind here that could cause some damaging wind gusts on the downslope side here of the Appalachians. And those tropical storm wind gusts could extend as far north as Kentucky. So a much different looking storm this morning. Maybe worst case scenario at this point, in my opinion. So take that and do what you will with it. Weather.gov is where you need to go. Always check out the National Hurricane Center for the latest. All right, here we go. Helene starting to strengthen. This is the GFS from overnight. This is actually the 6Z GFS. I'll show you the overnight run too. Very similar in what we just showed you, that track coming north around our upper low and sort of just hooking in like this. I'm going to take you back a little bit. Let's go back 6 hours before that. This is the 0Z run from last night. Very similar. So we are seeing a tremendous amount of model agreement in as far as the path goes, and especially as it speeds up. Once the upper low picks in here and that forward speed picks up, that path becomes even more defined and more clear. Rainfall is going to be a huge problem. Mudslides in the mountains. I think we're also going to see flash flooding, river flooding possible, and we could see more than a foot up to maybe even 16 inches of rain in some of the higher elevations. And I'm talking about along those east-southeast facing slopes. So the problem is here, your ridges run like this, right? And we talked about this a little bit too. That southeast flow, you get that upslope component, if you will, here, and that's just going to squeeze out the moisture from the Piedmont and then into the mountains here, right along the Blue Ridge. So Georgia, especially places like not just along the path of the storm from South Georgia, but look at North Georgia from Atlanta up to northern Georgia into the mountains here, South Carolina, Greenville, Spartanburg, up into the mountains from Asheville to Boone, up to Mount Rogers here across southern parts of Virginia, the Blue Ridge Mountains, and then up here into Virginia from Lynchburg, Roanoke, down to the North Carolina line. Once the air moves across the mountains, it starts to sink some, so there may be a bit of a rain shadow effect, but I talked about those wind gusts that sometimes pick up here with that southeast flow into Tennessee, so we may actually see some of those winds being brought down to the surface due to that mountain wave effect with Helene. Severe storms also possible today. This is Wednesday. Now, these down here will be associated with the storm. We have a washed out front, and I do want to say that there is moisture in place now. We're getting heavy rain today in these areas, priming things for flash flooding. Your severe weather as we head into Thursday here with that onshore flow on the east side of the storm, tornadoes looking likely in some of these areas. All right, let's time some of this out. Look at this rain. This is not what you want to see today. Heavy rain falling in areas that are going to just get inundated with more heavy rain. So not good from West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. And then here comes that tropical moisture. You've also got a bit of an Atlantic connection to here with this moisture feeding in like this and just sort of backing up against our front here, squeezing out that moisture. Here comes Helene on the NAM. And look, all this rain here that's falling today, way ahead of the storm. So this is not even really anything to do with Helene at this point. Maybe somewhat. I guess the flow could be arguably there, but mostly you've got this upper low, and then again I showed you that high, so you're just pushing that moisture in off the coast. And there's the future radar on Helene with the NAM, just pushing that moisture into Tennessee by Friday morning, and then it moves west across West Tennessee, West Kentucky, and it loses its tropical characteristics, but that heavy rain could persist. And honestly, I don't like the way some of these bands look here. That moisture still kind of spinning around that upper low, so we could keep more showers and locally heavy rain here into the Appalachians, possibly into the weekend. Let's take a look. Well, by the way, across the west, we do have some showers here across the Pacific Northwest. These will be moving in as we head into tonight, and then eventually some snow here into the Canadian Rockies, and then these showers move in. And then another system tries to affect this area a little colder too as we head toward the end of the week. Here's the official track from the National Hurricane Center. If you're following it, still forecast to become a major hurricane heading into Thursday. And then look at this. The National Hurricane Center still holding it into hurricane status here across South Georgia. So you have a major hurricane holding on to hurricane status for southern Georgia by 1 a.m. Friday. That's going to cause wind damage with heavy rain, uprooted trees, power outages. It's some of the language that you're seeing from the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center for these hurricane warnings. So if you're in those areas, they're talking about complete destruction of buildings, storm surge that will just annihilate places. There's no other way to say it, especially if you have a major hurricane along the coast and inland too. There will be damage here too. Places could be uninhabitable, especially along the coast for weeks or months, and roads could be impassable. We're talking about power outages. This is a very serious situation. So weather.gov, that's where you need to go to get the latest information on this. My friends, take this serious. Stay safe. don't just worry about, oh, I'm not in Florida. I'm not in Georgia. Listen, if you're in North Carolina, South Carolina, even up into Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, this is a flooding problem and also a wind issue too, because this thing is going to rapidly accelerate as it gets close to the coast. So we're moving this thing, look, Thursday afternoon off the coast of Florida. By Friday afternoon, it's going to be in Tennessee. Fast mover. That's why that worst case scenario, I think, is going to happen, because the faster it moves, it loses its hurricane status much slower. At least it carries it further inland, I should say. So a little longer video than normal. I hope it helps you, and we'll talk soon. Have a great one.